We received a comment that we thought we would make a video about because there are a lot of points here that we would like to address.
We like to get comments like this because, I don't know, we're kind of useless at just putting things together and then making a video of it. So when someone brings up points that need addressing, it's very inspirational and kind of convenient as well, because then we can address it as it comes. I think that's what we're going to do from now on. So thank you.
Here's the comment. I'd argue that one needs to know a lot more about Matthew Macfadyen as a person and what he used to be like in interviews to type him. When he was younger, he was far more closed off in interviews, seemingly cold even, due to intense shyness. In those, which are arguably more demonstrative of his natural tendencies because he hadn't yet had time to adapt and develop his weaknesses, his preference for FI is clear. He also has a history of being highly authentic in interviews to an extent which would be unusual for an INFJ. You note that INFJs will be likely to give good interviews, which is a very good point, but this is something Matthews had to work at. It certainly didn't come naturally to him. There are also several details he's revealed about himself which point strongly toward INFP. I agree with some of your interpretations here, because on the level of appearance, there is quite a bit of crossover between INFJs and INFPs, but when many interviews are taken into account, INFP is far more likely than INFJ.
I'd argue that one needs to know a lot about Matthew Macfadyen as a person and what he used to be like in interviews to type him. I mean, in a way, yes, I think. But do you need to know a lot about him? No, I don't think so. You don't need to know like the nuances of someone's life to type them.
Right.
But if you do know the nuances and you do investigate a bit more, I can understand what this person's saying. They're saying, oh, but there's a few exceptions here and there that make him different that you might need to understand as someone who, is a fan, presumably, right? If you see the type, then you see the type. And it's only if you don't see the type because of these nuances, differences, that you might need to investigate further. For Matthew Macfadyen, like, he was easy. I think I typed him within about 15 seconds, crazily enough, because I've seen it. It's like I have experience with this manifestation of this type.
And I knew him because it's my type. Like, I completely follow the whole thought process. I know exactly what he's doing in these interviews. It's like, in a way, I'm like living through him almost. I can kind of anticipate responses and everything because our brains work in a very similar way.
Right. So you're like, yes and no, really, is my answer to that.
We've had recent experiences with people that we've typed that aren't like us, that have processes different to us. And we've had to watch several interviews because we've been stumped initially. So we had to keep watching because we were having a hard time seeing the processes at work.
When he was younger, he was far more closed off in interviews, seemingly cold even, due to intense shyness. So yeah, I mean, anyone can be shy, and this is what we would say is circumstantial, or part of the circumstantial, as we say it. So yeah, I mean, shyness gives pretty similar results across the board of any type. It's something you have to work on, it's a confidence issue. Most of the time. Sometimes people are described as shy, just being of a certain nature, I think. But I think that's a bit different. In those which are arguably more demonstrative of his natural tendencies, because he hadn't had time to adapt and develop his weaknesses, his preference for FI is clearer. Right, so I think they're sort of saying he looks more like an FI user because he was shy
and cold
in previous interviews. But I wouldn't say that FI is associated across the board with being cold or shy, really.
In some cases, in some manifestations, I feel as the FE person here that it does come across as cold. But then again, I've known a lot of ESTJs who come across as very warm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
and then INFPs themselves, I mean, I'll go into this more later, but I do think people seem to think INFP and INFJ are very similar, but I really don't think so.
I don't either.
Absolutely worlds apart.
Mm-hmm.
Really. I think because both types are sort of popular in the online culture that they somehow get muddied, they get blended between the two types, and it's a bit foggy, But yeah, INFPs particularly, there's a few FI types that really come across like FE types, typically. When we look at an FE type, there's certain things that we're seeing that we're picking up on and then saying, yes, that's FE. That gives me the feeling of FE. That gets my intuition recognizing that it's FE. Then some types, like an INFP or ESTJ, like you said earlier, ENFP too, yeah.
Yeah, ENFP.
In some manifestations, they really get us thinking that they're FE people sometimes. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't match up. And you have to go through different avenues to be able to type them instead. He also has a history of being highly authentic in interviews, to an extent which would be unusual for an INFJ. Yeah, this is arguable because you would say it's authenticity. I would say that it's like hyped a little bit.
Yes.
And then seems a little bit fake.
Right. This is a perspective thing because as an FE feeler, I can perceive FI as fake.
Yeah, it's a perspective issue.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's a perspective issue because you and I were actually talking about this fake versus authentic thing in this very video.
Yes.
Because he made a comment and you said he was fake or you perceived him to be fake. And I disagreed with you because I think that you can't call it fake unless you understand the intention behind it or the motive. So perhaps he was, because we can all be fake, right? In how we present ourselves if there's some kind of like manipulation in it. But at the same time, I don't think you can say that without really knowing the intention behind it.
Yeah.
That was the specific example in that video.
Well, it's not that I wouldn't say I understand the motive behind it. It's more like that motive to me isn't like an excuse. It's a value sort of thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because we would say that to give someone a good experience, you have to give them what they want. You consider that to be fake, but we do not.
So, in the past, someone might have been, and this goes for FI people too, INFPs can be very guilty of this, trying to inspire and all the rest of that stuff. And for someone like me, that can be, I don't know, it comes off a little cringe because I think, these people they're trying to give me what they think that I want and I don't. It's like a misjudgment. Normally, like 99% of the time, they'd be fine and correct. But for me, it just doesn't sit well. And it almost has like the opposite effect. That,
yeah, no, well,
I just feel stupid and and I think, don't do that.
Yeah.
Just tell me how it is.
And this is a greater problem between FE, FI people. I think FE has to learn how to give it to the FI person without, trying to pretty it up and being all nice about it. Because I've seen this in arguments, even online among people, where the FE person is like, oh, thank you so much, for opening up this discussion. And I appreciate what you're doing here. In other words, they're coming to the argument with their value system, right? They're saying, okay, I'm going to approach the person the way I want to be approached, not realizing that this person doesn't see it that way. And then I actually see the response from the FI person. They actually get annoyed and angry about it.
Right.
And so there's kind of like a learning curve there where the FE person, if they know, and again, this is why typing is such an educational thing and so helpful for dealing with people, because if you're dealing with FI, then, you don't have to have all those niceties. You don't have to play by the same rules that FE on FE would expect. So you just kind of give it to them in the way that they want to hear it. And then I think you can have a better exchange that way.
The INFJs will be likely to give good interviews, which is a very good point. But this is something Matthews had to work at. I mean, doesn't everyone? What is considered a good interview to begin with? That's something you need to learn.
Right, she says
and you need to put your own self into it. Do you know what I mean? Like what good interview looks like for him is different from what I would consider. I'm not gonna, what is good interview be this certain way, be this certain person? Or is it be yourself and give the person what they want? I don't know. It looks different for different people, really, doesn't it? Because, I'm not going to act like Matthew McFadden in an interview. So does that mean my interview would be poor? What are we trying to achieve here? Is it like meant to be funny interviews? Is it meant to be like informative? I don't know.
She says here it certainly didn't come naturally to him. And again, I'm just going to use that same argument because he's probably awkward in the younger days because he knows how he's going to be perceived if he is just himself. And he's not sure about that yet because in younger life, you're not quite sure of who you are, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's shyness again, isn't it?
And it's the shyness, right?
So, you don't have to be an INFJ to be shy and then to be awkward in an interview and be uncomfortable because you lack a certain confidence.
Right.
That can be anyone. Certainly didn't come naturally to him. Yeah, I mean, an interview in a way is a very unnatural kind of situation. Yeah, so they say, there's several details, but they don't really elaborate on what the details are, so we can't really speak to that.
So I guess I'll start and talk about the viewpoint from the INFJ. And I can argue that being cold is quite common among young INFJ men. The fact that he is warmer now shows progression. It shows maturity and a comfortability with who he is, a reconciliation between thinking and feeling. I think that the INFJ male especially wars between thinking and feeling. Like which one should they let out and when? So I think because of the dominant introverted intuition and the unique function stack of the INFJ, there is this innate understanding of how we are perceived in the world. So the perception has been for a very long time that it's okay for women to cry and show emotion, whereas emotional displays among men is not always received with the same understanding. So I think the INFJ male intuitively senses this from a young age. And then there's this struggle to find authenticity between thinking and feeling, and intuition knows this. Should they show emotion? What will people think of me? And so I think the young INFJ male can come off as cold, as they were taught from a young age by the world to distrust emotional displays because they know they can be abused by showing such behavior, and probably more because they are unsure how to show emotion without losing their masculinity.
Yeah, that's an interesting one because they do seem to really get confused about whether they are thinkers or feelers sometimes.
Right.
And depending on the individual, they do sort of gravitate or their value differs, I think, in that some of them feel like they're feelers and they go with it, and others, they feel like they're thinking types and then they go with that.
I have to wonder how much of this has to do. You and I talk about this all the time, right? The circumstantial.
Right.
Like how much of this has to do with the male figures in their early lives?
I mean, we don't know how he was brought up, but these are the elements that create different manifestational types. So yes, there are a lot of varieties within the type itself, and these kind of things affect it and trick us to see beyond what they're giving you and see into their brain, basically. I don't think INFPs are cold.
Again, this is something that it's not like cut and dry, but I have known several INFP males, and all the ones that I've known in youth are very emotional, actually.
Right.
They're definitely more comfortable, I think, showing emotion. I'm sure there are some who aren't, for obvious reasons.
Yeah, again, circumstantial, all that stuff.
Yeah. But I guess if we were to say overall, I would think INFJ men are not comfortable showing their emotions, and I think INFP men are.
Yeah, this goes for like ISFJ too. There definitely is a thing for ENFJ as well. FE men seem to quickly realize that they're affected emotionally more than they would like.
Right.
And that often in their cultures is something they feel they have to work on for many reasons, really. It's not just like, oh, I can't cry because men don't cry. It's not really like that. they are FE people. And I think sometimes they think, if you cry, you're showing weakness where you should be showing strength.
Mm-hmm.
Or
well, again, this goes
people
back
around
to
you. Right?
there is an awareness among FE people of how you will be perceived by others. So they're going to understand how they will be perceived by the world.
Yeah. It's really difficult for an FI. I've said before, it's difficult to pretend. I think, it depends on the individual, obviously, but we do have a sense of I don't know, ISFPs would call it like a gut feeling, right? That's the words they would like, but yeah, it is a gut feeling. It's like, I don't know, we're like really stubborn. I think, once we've got an idea, if it doesn't feel right to us, that's pretty powerful stuff for any FI person.
I can give an example. So I know an INFP male, and I've known him since he was younger. And when he was in his teenage years, he was dating a girl, and she broke up with him, and she said he cried too much. Now, that could have been, okay, if that was an INFJ male, that would be almost like a life-changing event. They would probably shut so far off at that point, right? Like, I'm never going to cry again. I think it would make them really withdraw at that age. But on the contrary, because this guy is FI dominant, it didn't change him at all. He did not stop.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
Because
he's still he's in his 30s now. But he didn't change himself. In fact, I think he's probably even more emotional now. He's just comfortable with who he is. He's not afraid to cry, and he's not afraid to be emotionally vulnerable.
Yeah, there's this knowing, I think, with us. And it's like, if someone said that to me, not that they would, but if someone said that to me, I'd be like, well, this is me, and I know me, and you can't tell me who I am. And that coming from an FE person, that's a lot more rare.
Right. Because I think, especially in younger years, FE looks to others first to determine who they are.
Right, yeah. That's the misconception though, isn't it?
Yes.
That, you're just a doormat, basically.
Yeah, no.
And really, it's like you're just diving into the water to figure out how hot it is. And then you're going back and saying, was that temperature right for me? It's a thinking process, Well,
it's the Goldilocks story, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really what it boils down to.
And this segues perfectly into what we were saying before, because the INFJ is there thinking, it's a thinker, while it's thinking up its values and identity in a way. And, this is where people are getting confused in terms of the thinker, feeler dynamic all the time, because, they think or feel that they think and that they must be a thinker. When in reality, sort of a head time, for want of a better way of saying it, is not thinking necessarily. People think head time, oh yeah, I'm always in my head, I must be a thinker. But, most of probably the FE feelers, they're probably in their head most, out of most people, most of the time, realistically. Not across the board, but, I agree with some of your interpretations here, because on the level of appearance, there is quite a bit of crossover. Yeah, between INFJ and INFP. Yeah, I don't think so. No. I think this is the misconception because, like we were saying earlier, it's like muddy water. There's INFJs that think they're INFPs. There's plenty more INFPs that think they're INFJs. There's plenty of people that are INFPs that are in the U2 space that say they're INFJs, and they're not. And there's plenty of ISFPs too, which may sort of be confused for being a real INFP, that also think they're INFJs.
Right. So I think the greater problem here is that there's been a misrepresentation of both of these types over the last few years since people have started making videos on YouTube. I think what is being put forth as INFJ male is an INFP male.
Yes.
And then the problem is people take it as gospel. And we've mentioned this in our ISFP, not INTJ video. But what's happening is that there are certain prominent YouTube channels who are putting forth people as certain types, and they keep putting it forth over and over. And people are looking to this person and saying, oh, that must be what an INTJ looks like, when it's really an ISFP male. Or this must be what INFJ male really looks like, when it's really an INFP male. And so it's kind
it's
of
almost
like
they've changed places, you know?
Right.
So the INFP male is actually more associated with being INFJ.
Yeah, so our Tom Hiddleston video all the time is being questioned. You know, he's an INFP, when he's really a very good representation of an INFJ male.
Yeah. They're sort of comparing manifestation of INFP and saying that's INFJ. And then, you know, there's others that they just oddly get right. And I think it's because they have a different manifestation.
Right.
So like Benedict Cumberbatch, did they get him correct? I think they did. But like, how is Benedict Cumberbatch really that different from Tom Hiddleston? He's not. That very specific manifestation of Hiddleston, they seem to think is INFP. And then anything that's very, very close to that manifestation, they will say is INFP.
Yeah, and I guess we can't say this strongly enough, but this is a huge problem. I don't know, if you start out in math with 2 + 2 = 5, well, then you're going to have problems from there. So, you know, when you watch these channels and you accept what's being given you as a certain type and it really isn't, then you're going to start comparing to that type and you're going to run into trouble.
It's hard because, you know, at this point, in a way, the INFJ has been hijacked by the INFP.
Yes.
So it's like, is the INFP basically the INFJ at this point? Like, should you just switch the letters around to make more sense? Because it's ingrained. It's almost like the mass wrong typing is out there, and in that way, it's more correct than it actually is wrong.
Right.
At least they're getting it right, but they're getting it wrong. It's the wrong letters.
Mm-hmm. And interestingly enough, I don't see it happening as much with the females.
No,
and
the
of
females
course,
are more consistent.
Yeah, and of course we know why that is, right? Because there isn't a very popular INFP female out there claiming to be INFJ female.
No, well, there's several males.
Yes, and as far as I know, there aren't any ISFP females out there claiming to be INFJ females that are making videos that I know of.
No, I mean they certainly do, but they don't make
Right. They don't make YouTube videos. So I think this is a very specific problem based on the material that's out there right now.